My name is Allison Parker, and I am 28 years old. I never thought buying that lottery ticket would change anything. It was just my small rebellion against my controlling parents. Then came the day they threw me out with nothing but a suitcase, telling me I was a disappointment. What they did not know was that, at that exact moment, my phone pinged with a notification. I had just won $15.7 million. From homeless to millionaire in one afternoon. If you are watching this from somewhere warm and cozy, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I went from homeless to homeowner in less than 24 hours. I grew up in Wellesley, an affluent suburb just outside of Boston. Our house was a beautiful colonial with perfect landscaping and an immaculate interior that looked like it came straight out of Architectural Digest. But appearances can be deceiving. Inside those pristine walls lived a family with extremely high expectations and very little room for failure. My father, Richard Parker, built his reputation as one of Boston's most ruthless corporate attorneys. His clients loved him for his meticulous attention to detail and unwavering dedication to winning. At home, he applied those same exacting standards to his only daughter. Every report card was scrutinized. Every extracurricular activity was expected to yield awards, and every decision I made was subject to his approval, or more often his criticism. My mother, Diane, managed our home with the precision of a military operation. She was the quintessential perfectionist homemaker whose identity was wrapped up in maintaining both our family image and her position in the local social hierarchy. Growing up, my clothes were always perfectly pressed, my hair impeccably styled, and my manners flawlessly rehearsed for the endless parade of dinner parties and social events where I was expected to be the perfect reflection of their parenting. From as early as I can remember, there was a very specific plan for my life. I would attend an Ivy League school, pursue a practical degree in law or medicine, marry someone from a good family, and continue the Parker legacy of success and social standing. There was just one problem with this perfect plan. It was never what I wanted. While my parents saw the world in spreadsheets and social connections, I saw it in colors, textures, and designs. I was artistic to my core. I spent hours sketching in notebooks that I had to hide under my mattress because my father called my art a distraction from real studies. In high school, my art teacher, Mr. Lewis, was the first person who ever told me I had genuine talent. He helped me build a portfolio in secret and encouraged me to apply to art schools. The confrontation when I announced I wanted to study graphic design instead of pre-law at Georgetown was explosive. My father called it a waste of potential. My mother cried about what she would tell her friends, but for once I stood my ground. It was the first major fracture in our relationship, one that would never fully heal. I did compromise by attending Boston University instead of the art school. I really wanted majoring in graphic design with a minor in marketing to appease my parents. They reluctantly paid for my education, but the underlying message was clear. They were humoring what they considered a phase, expecting me to eventually come to my senses. After graduation, I built a respectable career at a mid-sized marketing firm in Boston. I was not making the six-figure salary my parents thought I should, but I was financially independent and doing work I genuinely enjoyed. For a few years, we maintained a cordial, if distant, relationship. Sunday dinners were tense affairs, filled with subtle digs about when I would get a serious career or meet a suitable man. But I endured them because, despite everything, they were still my family. Then the economic downturn hit. Our firm lost several major clients, and despite my strong portfolio and positive reviews, I was part of the layoff wave. 22 people from our creative department gone in a single afternoon. It was not personal, it was not my fault, but try telling that to Richard and Diane Parker. At 28 years old, with my savings quickly dwindling and Boston rental prices skyrocketing, I made what felt like my only option at the time. I moved back home. It was supposed to be temporary just until I found another position. I had interviews lined up, I had prospects, but none of that mattered to my parents, who saw my return as confirmation of what they had always believed my chosen path was a dead end. The first week was actually bearable. There was a honeymoon period where they were almost kind, probably because they thought my career failure would make me malleable, ready to accept their guidance at last. When I continued sending out my portfolio to design agencies, instead of applying to law schools or corporate management positions, the true colors emerged again. My father would leave law school brochures on my bed. My mother would casually mention friends whose daughters were doctors, lawyers, or married to investment bankers. Each night at dinner became an interrogation about my job search, with every response met with thinly veiled disappointment. 3 months stretched on this way. 3 months of my self-esteem being chipped away piece by piece. 3 months of being treated like a teenager instead of a professional adult, experiencing a setback. 3 months of my mother commenting on my weight, my clothes, my habits. 3 months of my father talking about me in the third person while I sat right at the table as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be supported. My one small act of independence during this time was buying a weekly lottery ticket. My parents considered gambling of any kind to be for the weak-minded and irresponsible, but every Friday I would walk to the convenience store 3 blocks away and spend $2 on a ticket. It was not about the money. It was about the momentary fantasy of escape, of having choices again, of imagining a life where I answered to no one but myself. The week before everything fell apart, tensions reached a breaking point. I had a promising interview with a boutique design agency that specialized in branding for sustainable businesses. It aligned perfectly with my values and portfolio. The creative director had responded enthusiastically to my work, and I was called back for a second interview. When I shared this news at dinner, hoping for even a token of support, my father scoffed. Drawing pictures for tree huggers. That will certainly pay the bills. Graphic design is not drawing pictures, Dad. And yes, they pay quite well, actually. Not well enough to keep you from ending up back in your childhood bedroom, my mother added, serving herself more salad but skipping my plate. I had a solid emergency fund, but 3 months of unemployment in one of the most expensive cities in the country would strain anyone's savings. I defended myself, trying to keep my voice steady. Perhaps if you had pursued a real profession, you would have had more than 3 months of runway, my father said, not looking up from his steak. The conversation devolved from there, ending with me excusing myself before dessert and crying silently in my room. Little did I know that this was merely the prelude to the storm that would arrive that fateful Friday. I woke up that Friday morning to the sound of my mother aggressively vacuuming the hallway outside my bedroom door at 7:30 a.m. It was her passive-aggressive way of saying I had slept too late, despite the fact that I had been up until 2 a.m., refining my portfolio for an interview later that day. With a groan, I dragged myself out of bed and put on a robe. When I opened my door, my mother looked up with feigned surprise. "Oh, you are finally awake. I thought you might sleep through another perfectly good morning." "Good morning to you too, Mom," I said, trying to infuse my voice with a cheerfulness I definitely did not feel. I was working on my portfolio until late. I have that interview with Horizon Design at 2 p.m. today. She pursed her lips and turned off the vacuum. Your father and I were up at 5:30 as usual. There is coffee downstairs, though it is probably cold by now. This was typical. No acknowledgement of my interview, no good luck wishes, just a reminder that I was not measuring up to their standards. I headed downstairs to reheat the coffee and maybe grab some toast before starting my day. My father was seated at the kitchen island, Wall Street Journal spread out before him, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He did not look up when I entered. "Good morning, Dad," I said, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Afternoon would be more accurate," he replied dryly. I checked the kitchen clock. It was 7:43 a.m. I bit my tongue and poured the cold coffee into a mug, placing it in the microwave. I have that second interview today, I said, trying once more for some semblance of normal family conversation, the one with Horizon Design. They do branding for sustainable companies. The creative director really liked my portfolio. My father finally looked up, folding his newspaper with deliberate precision. Allison, you have been back home for over 3 months now. How long do you plan to continue chasing these dead-end creative jobs? The microwave beeped, and I retrieved my coffee, taking a long sip before responding. I needed the caffeine to face this conversation. They are not dead-end jobs, Dad. Graphic design is a legitimate career with growth potential. I was doing well before the layoffs, and I will do well again. You call that doing well? You could barely afford your apartment with a roommate. Your cousin Melissa just made junior partner at her firm, and she is a year younger than you. Here we go again. The comparison game. It never ended. I was happy, I said firmly. I was doing work I found meaningful and challenging. Is that not what should matter? My father removed his glasses, his signal that he was about to deliver what he considered an important life lesson. Happiness does not pay bills, Allison. Security does. Respect does. A proper career does. This design hobby was fine to explore in your 20s, but you are 28 now. It is time to get serious about your future. I placed my mug down carefully, feeling my temper rise. It is not a hobby, it is my profession. I have 3 interviews lined up, including the one today. The job market is tough right now for everyone, not just designers. 3 interviews for more unstable creative positions, he scoffed. Meanwhile, my colleague James has a daughter your age who just finished law school. She has multiple offers from top firms. That could have been you. I do not want to be a lawyer. The words came out louder than I intended. I never wanted to be a lawyer, or a doctor, or any of the careers you and Mom decided were acceptable. I am good at what I do and I enjoy it. Why is that so hard for you to accept? My mother chose that moment to enter the kitchen, her timing impeccable as always when it came to family conflict. What is all this shouting about? She asked, though her expression made it clear she had heard everything. Allison seems to think that at nearly 30 years old, living in her childhood bedroom and chasing artistic jobs is a reasonable life plan, my father explained, as if I were not standing right there. I am not nearly 30. I am 28. I corrected, and this living arrangement is temporary. I have interviews. I am actively job hunting. What more do you want from me? We want you to wake up and face reality, my mother said, her voice taking on that concerned tone she used when she wanted to seem supportive while actually being critical. Darling, this design phase was cute for a while, but it is clearly not providing you with stability. Your father and I only want what is best for you. No, I said, setting down my mug with a thud. You want what you think is best for me. You want what looks good to your friends. You want what fits your narrow definition of success. You have never once asked me what I want or respected my choices. My father's face darkened, a sure sign his temper was rising. We put a roof over your head, food on your plate, paid for your education, even when you insisted on that impractical major. And this is the gratitude we get. This attitude. Gratitude. You have held those things over my head my entire life. Everything came with conditions. Everything was a bargaining chip to control my choices. Real parents support their children's dreams, not crush them at every opportunity. My mother gasped as if I had slapped her. How dare you imply we are not real parents? We have given you everything. Everything except acceptance. Everything except respect for my decisions. Everything except unconditional love. The kitchen fell silent. I had never spoken to them this way before, had never put into words the feelings that had been building for years. Part of me was terrified, but another part felt a strange liberation. My father stood up, his 6'2" frame towering over me. I have had enough of this disrespect. You want to throw away your potential on doodling for a living. Fine, but not under my roof. Not anymore. My mother looked alarmed for a moment, but quickly composed herself and stood by my father, a united front, as always. Richard, she said quietly, though not in disagreement, perhaps we should all calm down. No, Diane. I am perfectly calm. His voice was cold and controlled, which was always more frightening than when he yelled. Allison has made her choice clear. She wants to be independent and pursue this so-called career without our input. She can do so without our support as well. I stared at him, not quite believing what I was hearing. Are you kicking me out? Seriously? You have until this evening to pack your things, he said, straightening his tie as if we were concluding a business meeting rather than shattering our family. If you cannot respect this family's values while living under this roof, then perhaps some time in the real world will help you reassess your priorities. Richard, my mother tried again, but her protest was weak at best. No, Diane, we have coddled her long enough. Sometimes children need to experience consequences to learn their lessons. I stood there, coffee forgotten, feeling a surreal detachment from the scene. This could not be happening. Parents did not actually throw their adult children out over career disagreements, but the resolute expression on my father's face told me this was very real. Fine, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I will be gone by tonight. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, head held high, despite the tears threatening to spill. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I heard my mother's hushed voice. Do you think that was necessary, Richard? She will come to her senses once she realizes how difficult life is without our support. A few weeks struggling on her own, and she will be ready to listen to reason. Their voices faded as I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to fall. I had just been disowned for the crime of wanting to follow my own path, for refusing to be the person they wanted me to be, rather than the person I was. After allowing myself exactly 5 minutes of crying, I wiped my face and stood up. If they wanted me gone, I would go. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and began the painful process of deciding what essentials I could fit into one bag. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop and portfolio materials, a few cherished photos and keepsakes. Everything else would have to stay behind. As I was carefully wrapping a framed sketch Mr. Lewis had given me at graduation, my phone pinged with a notification. Probably another bill reminder or credit card offer, I thought. But when I glanced at the screen, my entire world shifted on its axis. The day before had started like any other Thursday in my increasingly tense stay at my parents' house. I had woken up early to avoid breakfast with them, grabbed coffee from the local cafe, and spent the morning applying for design positions and polishing my portfolio. Around noon, I decided to take a walk to clear my head and escape the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood home. My path took me past Jensen's convenience store, a small family-owned shop that had been on the corner of Maple and Elm for as long as I could remember. Jensen's was my weekly stop for my small act of rebellion, my lottery ticket. The bell chimed cheerfully as I pushed open the door. Behind the counter was Jessica, the owner's daughter, who had taken over the store when her father retired. We had gone to high school together, though we ran in different circles. She had always been kind to me, one of the few people who never seemed to care about the Parker family reputation. Allison, right on schedule, Jessica said with a warm smile. The usual, "You know me too well," I replied, returning her smile. It felt good to be greeted with genuine warmth, something in short supply at home. "One quick pick for tomorrow's drawing coming right up," she said, turning to the lottery machine. "How's the job hunt going?" "I have an interview tomorrow, actually. Second round with a place I'm really excited about." "That's fantastic. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you," she said, printing out my ticket. "Who knows, maybe this will be your lucky week all around." I laughed as I handed over $2. That would be a welcome change of pace. You never know when your luck will turn, Jessica said, handing me the ticket. My dad always said that fortune favors those who keep showing up. I tucked the ticket into my wallet without much thought. It was never really about winning for me, just the small thrill of doing something my parents would disapprove of, making a choice that was entirely my own, however inconsequential. Thanks, Jessica. See you next week, I said, waving, as I left the store, never imagining that this routine transaction would change the course of my life. Now, less than 24 hours later, I was staring at my phone in disbelief. The notification was from my banking app. Deposit of $15, 7000000.00 pending verification. Please contact customer service. My hands began to shake so violently I had to sit down on the edge of my bed. This had to be a mistake. A glitch in the app? A cruel prank? Things like this did not happen in real life, and certainly not to people who had just been thrown out of their family home. With trembling fingers, I opened my wallet and pulled out the lottery ticket I had purchased yesterday. I pulled up the winning numbers on my phone and checked them against my ticket once, twice, 3 times. They matched. All 6 numbers matched. The room seemed to spin around me. I felt a bizarre urge to laugh and cry simultaneously. I clapped my hand over my mouth to stifle the sound, not wanting to draw attention from downstairs. My parents could not know about this. Not now. Not after what had just happened. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. Think logically, Allison. This is real. This is happening. What do I do now? First, I needed to confirm this was legitimate. I called the number on the back of the lottery ticket, my voice barely above a whisper as I explained the situation to the lottery commission representative. Yes, Miss Parker, I can confirm that the winning ticket for last night's drawing was purchased at Jensen's convenience store in Wellesley, Massachusetts, the representative said. If you believe you have the winning ticket, you'll need to bring it to our main office to begin the verification and claiming process. I strongly advise you to sign the back of your ticket immediately and keep it in a secure location. I thanked her and hung up my mind, working overtime to process this information. $15.7 million. After taxes, that would be, I quickly calculated in my head, still over $10 million. I was a multimillionaire. On the same day, my parents had decided I was a failure and kicked me out of their house. The irony was so perfect, it was almost painful. I signed the back of the ticket with shaking hands, then took a photo of both sides as backup. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the hidden pocket of my wallet, then resumed packing with a strange sense of calm that had replaced my earlier panic. As I methodically folded clothes and organized my belongings, my mind was racing through next steps. I would need a lawyer, a financial advisor, a plan for anonymity if possible. I had read enough stories about lottery winners whose lives were ruined by sudden wealth to know that caution was essential. I opened an incognito browser on my laptop and began researching what to do after winning the lottery. The consensus seemed clear: tell as few people as possible, seek professional financial advice before claiming, consider claiming anonymously through a trust or LLC if state laws allowed it, and do not make any major life changes immediately. Well, I thought with grim humor, the major life change was already happening regardless of the lottery win. I was being forced out of my childhood home. The difference was that now I had options. Incredible, life-changing options. For a brief moment, I considered revealing my win to my parents. The fantasy of seeing their faces when they realized they had thrown out their newly minted millionaire daughter was admittedly tempting. But the wiser part of me recognized that would be a decision made from hurt and spite, not careful consideration. No, I decided as I zipped up my suitcase. They had made their choice based on who they thought I was: a failure, a disappointment, someone who needed to be taught a harsh lesson about the real world. Learning about my win would not change their fundamental lack of respect for my choices and autonomy. It would only make them regret losing access to my money, not losing me. I spent the next hour making calls from the privacy of my room, my voice kept low. First to the lottery commission to get specific details about the claiming process. Then to a law firm specializing in sudden wealth management, where I managed to secure an emergency consultation for the following morning. Finally to my best friend Heather, asking if I could crash at her place for a few days while I figured things out. I told her only that I had had a major fight with my parents and was being asked to leave. The lottery win would remain my secret for now. As I finished my preparations, a strange calm settled over me. 24 hours ago, I had been worried about making rent if I found a new apartment. Now I was worried about managing millions of dollars responsibly. 24 hours ago, being kicked out seemed like the worst possible scenario. Now it felt like the universe had orchestrated my liberation. I took one last look around the room that had been mine since childhood, but had never truly felt like it belonged to me. The pale blue walls my mother had chosen, the practical furniture my father had selected, the few personal touches I had been allowed. Nothing here reflected who I really was. Perhaps that was the point all along. I picked up my suitcase, my laptop bag, and my purse, containing the most valuable piece of paper I had ever possessed, and headed downstairs to wait for my parents to return from their workday. The countdown to my new life had begun. At 5:30 p.m., I heard the sound of the garage door opening. My father was always precisely on time, another aspect of his regimented approach to life. My mother's car would follow minutes later, her schedule coordinated to ensure dinner was served promptly at 6:15 each evening. I sat in the living room, my suitcase and bags beside me, hands folded in my lap like a visitor waiting for an appointment rather than a daughter in her family home. The lottery ticket felt like it was burning a hole in my wallet, but I reminded myself to stay calm and focused. My father entered first, his footsteps halting briefly when he saw me sitting there. He quickly recovered, straightening his posture, as he always did when preparing for a confrontation. "I see you have packed," he said, setting his briefcase down. "Good. I'm glad to see you're being sensible." I said nothing, just watched as he loosened his tie slightly, the only concession he ever made to relaxation when he first arrived home. The garage door sounded again, and moments later, my mother walked in, her expression shifting from neutral to surprise when she saw the scene before her. "Allison," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment. "You're really going through with this?" "I didn't realize I had a choice," I replied evenly. "Dad made it quite clear this morning." My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I discussed it further today. We're willing to give you another chance provided you're ready to be reasonable." Of course. They had expected me to spend the day panicking, realizing I had nowhere to go, and preparing to beg forgiveness and accept whatever conditions they set. The fact that I appeared calm and prepared was clearly not part of their script. Reasonable meaning what exactly, I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Meaning you accept that this graphic design phase has run its course," my mother said, setting her purse down and perching on the edge of an armchair. "Your father has spoken with Harold Thompson at his firm. There's an administrative position opening up next month. It's entry level, but it would give you a foot in the door at a respectable company. You could take some night classes, perhaps consider law school in a year or two." I almost laughed. Even now, they couldn't help but try to steer me toward the life they wanted. They couldn't conceive of a world where their vision wasn't the only valid one. "That's very thoughtful," I said carefully. "But I'm not interested in abandoning my career. I have an interview tomorrow that I'm very excited about." My father's expression hardened. "Then, it seems we have nothing more to discuss. If you're determined to throw away our help and guidance, that's your choice." "It is my choice," I agreed, standing up. "Just like it's your choice to make your love and support conditional on me living the exact life you've prescribed." "That is not fair, Allison," my mother protested. "We have supported you." As long as I stayed within the boundaries you set, I interrupted. That's not support, Mom. That's control. How dare you speak to your mother that way? My father said, his voice rising. After everything we've done for you. I'm grateful for the privileges I've had, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. But I'm not grateful for the constant message that I'm only worthwhile if I meet your definition of success. I'm not grateful for being made to feel like a failure for pursuing a career I love. And I'm certainly not grateful for being thrown out of my home for having the audacity to stand up for myself. My mother's eyes welled with tears, but I had seen this tactic too many times before. The tears would come, followed by guilt, followed by me apologizing and falling back in line. Not this time. We only want what's best for you, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she produced from her sleeve. No, you want what you think is best for me. There's a difference. And after 30 years, you still don't know who I really am or what actually makes me happy. This is the real world, Allison, my father said coldly. Happiness doesn't pay the bills. Responsibility does. Practicality does. I picked up my suitcase and shouldered my laptop bag. I understand the real world better than you think, Dad. And I'm ready to face it on my own terms. You'll regret this, he said, his tone, making it clear he thought I'd come crawling back within days. When you're struggling to make rent and eating ramen noodles every night, remember that you chose this. Little did he know that rent would never be a concern for me again. But I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing any doubt or fear. I choose myself, I said simply. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself over your approval. And that's worth more than you can imagine. I walked toward the door feeling a complex mixture of grief, liberation, and anticipation. As I reached for the handle, my mother spoke again. Allison, please, where will you even go? I have friends, Mom. People who accept me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I opened the door and stepped outside the warm evening air enveloping me. As I walked down the pristine stone path that led from our front door to the street, I heard the door open again behind me. You always were too stubborn for your own good, my father called after me. When you're ready to be reasonable, you know where to find us. I didn't turn around, just kept walking steadily forward. The weight of my suitcase felt insignificant compared to the emotional baggage I was finally setting down. As I reached the sidewalk, I noticed our elderly neighbor, Noah Thompson, watering his roses. He had lived next door for decades and had always been kind to me, slipping me cookies when I was a child and asking about my art as I grew older. The concern on his face was evident as he took in the suitcase and my determined expression. Everything all right, Allison? He asked gently. It will be Mr. Thompson, I replied with a small smile. Sometimes you have to leave to find your way home. He nodded sagely, his eyes drifting toward my parents' house. Your home is where you make it, dear, not where others tell you it should be. I thanked him and continued walking to the corner where I'd called a ride share. As I waited, I pulled out my phone and called Heather. Hey, I'm on my way, I said when she answered. Thanks again for letting me crash. Of course, she replied, the concern evident in her voice. Are you okay? What happened? It's a long story, I said, watching as my ride approached. I'll tell you everything when I get there. Well, almost everything I thought as I ended the call. The lottery win would remain my secret a while longer, until I had secured proper legal protection and financial advice. As the car pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one glance back at the house where I had grown up. It looked perfect from the outside, immaculate landscaping, tasteful architecture, every detail curated for maximum impression. Just like the family image my parents had worked so hard to maintain. But I knew the truth now. Perfect exteriors often hid the deepest flaws, and sometimes losing everything you thought you needed was the first step to finding what you actually deserved. I turned away and faced forward, watching the familiar streets of my childhood slip away as I headed toward an uncertain but undeniably exciting future. For the first time in my life, I felt truly completely free. Heather lived in a cozy one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge, just a short walk from the bustling Harvard Square. When I arrived, she greeted me with a fierce hug and immediately pulled me inside. "Okay, Spill," she said once we were settled on her worn but comfortable sofa, mugs of tea in hand. "What happened? Your text was cryptic as hell." I took a deep breath and gave her the edited version of the story, the ongoing tension with my parents, the ultimatum being thrown out for refusing to abandon my career. I left out the part about suddenly becoming a multimillionaire. It wasn't that I didn't trust Heather, but I needed to get my legal ducks in a row first. Those entitled, controlling Heather launched into a colorful description of my parents that made me laugh despite everything. Heather had never been impressed by my family's status or my father's reputation. It was one of the reasons we had remained close since college. "So, what's your plan?" she asked after we had thoroughly dissected my parents' behavior. "I have that interview tomorrow at Horizon Design," I said. "Beyond that, I guess I need to find an apartment, keep job hunting, rebuild." "You can stay here as long as you need," Heather assured me, squeezing my hand. "The sofa pulls out, and it's not too bad. Not as nice as your parents' place, but—" "It's perfect," I interrupted. "It's offered with real friendship, which makes it worth more than anything they could provide." We stayed up late talking, and I waited until Heather had gone to bed before pulling out my laptop to continue my research on managing sudden wealth. I created a to-do list for the morning, setting my alarm for 6 a.m. to get an early start on what would be the most important day of my financial life. Sleep was nearly impossible. I kept oscillating between anxiety about being essentially homeless and exhilaration about being secretly wealthy. When my alarm went off, I had managed maybe 3 hours of restless sleep, but adrenaline had me wide awake instantly. I showered quickly and dressed in one of the 2 professional outfits I had managed to pack. I left a note for Heather saying I had an early appointment before my interview and would text her later. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting in the lobby of Winthrop Blackwell and Associates, one of Boston's most respected law firms, specializing in estate planning and wealth management. I had managed to secure an emergency consultation with Patricia Blackwell herself, thanks to an urgent email I had sent the night before explaining my situation. "Miss Parker." A polished receptionist approached me. "Miss Blackwell will see you now." Patricia Blackwell was a formidable woman in her 50s with a sharp bob and sharper eyes. Her office was elegant but not ostentatious, with degrees and professional certificates displayed tastefully on one wall. "So," she said once I was seated across from her, "you believe you've won the lottery." "I know I have," I replied, sliding the ticket across her desk, along with the confirmation email I had received from the Lottery Commission. "I just need guidance on how to claim it properly and protect myself." She examined the documentation carefully, then looked up with new interest. "This appears legitimate. Massachusetts allows winners to claim through a trust to maintain privacy. I assume that's what you're interested in." "Absolutely," I confirmed. "No one knows about this win yet, not even my closest friends, and I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible." For the next hour, Patricia outlined the process of creating a blind trust through which I could claim my winnings anonymously. She also recommended a financial advisor she had worked with previously who specialized in sudden wealth management. "This is not just about claiming the money, Miss Parker. It's about protecting it and yourself long term. Lottery winners have a notoriously poor track record of maintaining their wealth." "I've read the statistics," I assured her. "I have no intention of becoming another cautionary tale." By 9:30 a.m., I had signed the paperwork to create the New Horizon Trust, a small private joke referencing both my upcoming job interview and my new beginning with Patricia as the trustee who would claim the winnings on my behalf. She also connected me via conference call with Catherine Graham, the financial advisor she had recommended. "I can see you tomorrow morning at 8, Catherine said, after I briefly explained my situation. "In the meantime, do not make any large purchases or financial commitments. The trust will take a few days to establish, and the lottery commission will need time to verify and process your claim." "Actually," I said, "I do need a place to stay that's more private than my friend's sofa. Would a hotel be acceptable?" "A reasonable hotel for a short period is fine," Catherine conceded. "Just don't book the presidential suite or start ordering champagne by the case." After finishing with the legal and financial preliminaries, I had just enough time to check into a modest but comfortable hotel in Back Bay before my interview at Horizon Design. The contrast between my morning and afternoon activities was surreal, going from planning how to manage millions to interviewing for a job that would pay maybe $70,000 a year. But the strange thing was, I still wanted the job. Money aside, I loved design work, and Horizon's focus on sustainable businesses aligned perfectly with my values. Plus, I knew from watching lottery winners implode that maintaining normalcy and purpose was crucial for long-term happiness. The interview went brilliantly. My portfolio impressed the creative director, and our discussion about design philosophy and approach flowed naturally. When they asked about my salary expectations, I gave a reasonable figure based on market rates, not revealing that I could now work for free if I wanted to. After the interview, buoyed by the positive experience and the knowledge that I had a financial safety net, regardless of the outcome, I decided to do something I had been putting off for months due to budget constraints. I went shopping for some new clothes. Nothing extravagant, just a few quality pieces to replace items I hadn't been able to bring with me. As I browsed through a boutique I normally would have considered well out of my price range, I kept reminding myself to be reasonable. No one goes from careful budgeting to lavish spending overnight without raising eyebrows, even if they suddenly can afford it. I selected 2 professional outfits, a casual weekend outfit, and some basic necessities, keeping the total under $1,000 splurge territory for the old Allison, but restrained for a newly minted millionaire. Next, I treated myself to lunch at an upscale cafe, savoring a meal I didn't have to justify or economize. As I sat there, watching people rush by, outside the magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. 24 hours ago, I had been at the mercy of my parents' judgment and financial power. Now I had more financial security than they did, all while they believed I was struggling. The irony was almost too perfect. But along with the satisfaction came a wave of sadness. Why hadn't they ever believed in me? Why was their love so conditional? Would money really change anything fundamental about our relationship? I paid my bill and walked back to the hotel, stopping along the way to make appointments with several real estate agents for the following day. Finding a permanent home would be my first priority once the trust was established and the lottery claim processed. Back in my hotel room, I allowed myself a moment of emotional release. Sitting on the edge of the king-sized bed, I finally let the tears come. Tears of relief, of lingering hurt from my parents' rejection, of anxiety about the massive changes happening in my life, and of overwhelming gratitude for the person's incredible stroke of luck that had given me true independence. After a good cry in the privacy of my hotel bathroom, I washed my face and looked at myself in the mirror. "You've got this, Allison," I said to my reflection, "one step at a time." I spent the evening researching neighborhoods where I might want to live, creating a budget for my new life, despite having more money than I could reasonably spend, and making a list of trusted friends I would eventually share my news with, once everything was legally secured. As I prepared for bed that night, less than 48 hours after buying that fateful lottery ticket, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed. I had lost my family but gained unimaginable freedom. I had been thrown out with nothing but a suitcase, yet now had the resources to create exactly the life I wanted. It wasn't the money itself that felt like the biggest win. It was the freedom from ever having to compromise my dreams or my integrity for financial security again. My parents had always used money as a tool of control. Now that tool was forever removed from their arsenal. I fell asleep thinking not about what I would buy, but about what I would build a life authentically, my own, on my own terms, answering to no one's expectations but my own. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Patricia's legal team efficiently established the New Horizon Trust, and my winning ticket was submitted to the Lottery Commission. Catherine Graham, my new financial advisor, created a comprehensive wealth management plan that included diversified investments, charitable giving strategies, and a reasonable monthly salary to myself to maintain normal spending patterns. With the legal and financial foundation in place, I turned my attention to finding a permanent home. After viewing properties in several Boston neighborhoods, I fell in love with a modern townhouse in the South End. It featured 3 bedrooms, a rooftop deck with city views, and most importantly, a perfect space for a home design studio with abundant natural light. The asking price was $2.4 million, a sum that would have been unthinkable to me just weeks ago, but now represented a responsible allocation of my newfound wealth. With the trust as the purchasing entity, I made a cash offer slightly above asking price to secure the property quickly and privately. The sellers accepted your offer, my real estate agent Maria informed me 2 days later. They're thrilled to avoid the financing contingencies and extended closing process. We can close in 2 weeks if that works for you. Perfect, I replied, still somewhat in disbelief that I was purchasing a multi-million-dollar property and the home office conversion we discussed. I've already contacted several contractors who can begin work the day after closing. The preliminary designs for your studio space look fantastic. While waiting for the closing, I stayed at the hotel and focused on building my new life structure. I received good news from Horizon Design. They offered me the position with a slightly higher salary than I had requested. After consulting with Catherine, I decided to accept the job despite not needing the income. Having a professional purpose and normal daily routine would be essential for my emotional well-being and would also provide cover for my sudden change in lifestyle. Most lottery winners who implode make the mistake of abandoning their normal lives entirely, Catherine had advised. Maintaining a career you enjoy, especially one with creative fulfillment, is actually the smartest financial decision you can make. It's about psychological wealth as much as monetary wealth. The closing on the townhouse went smoothly, and I moved in the following weekend. The space was largely empty at first, with just the few items I had brought in my suitcase and some basic furniture I had purchased for immediate needs. To create a home that truly reflected my aesthetic and personality, I hired Eleanor Wright, an interior designer whose work I had long admired. The space has incredible potential, Eleanor said during our initial consultation. What vision do you have for it? I want it to feel like me, I explained. Creative but organized, modern but warm. A place where I can both work and relax without feeling like I'm compromising either. Over the next month, Eleanor helped transform the empty townhouse into a home that felt entirely mine, in a way my bedroom at my parents' house never had. We created a stunning workspace with custom built-in storage for my design materials, a comfortable living area perfect for entertaining friends, and a master bedroom that felt like a peaceful retreat. Throughout this process, I was careful to maintain normal contact with Heather and my other close friends. I explained my new home and lifestyle as the result of an unexpected inheritance from a distant great-aunt, technically true in the sense that Lady Luck had indeed bestowed a fortune upon me, though not in the conventional family way. "This place is incredible," Heather exclaimed during her first visit. "Great-aunt, whoever must have really liked you." "It was unexpected," I said truthfully, "but it came at exactly the right time." "And your parents? Have they reached out at all?" she asked carefully. "No," I admitted, "but through the grapevine I've heard they're telling family friends I had some kind of breakdown and moved out abruptly. Apparently, they're positioning themselves as the concerned, bewildered parents whose daughter mysteriously pulled away." That's maddening, Heather said, indignant on my behalf. Are you going to set the record straight? I considered this question carefully. Part of me wanted to correct the narrative to make sure everyone knew exactly what had happened and who had really rejected whom. But what would that accomplish beyond perpetuating drama and negativity? No, I decided. Let them tell whatever story makes them feel better. I know the truth, and the people who truly matter in my life know it too. I'm focusing on building something positive rather than fighting old battles. With my home established and my job at Horizon Design going well, I turned my attention to longer-term plans. Working with Catherine, I established a charitable foundation focused on supporting arts education in underprivileged communities. It was my way of honoring the impact Mr. Prakad Lewis had made on my life by encouraging my artistic talents when my parents would not. I also began quietly exploring the possibility of starting my own design agency. While I enjoyed my work at Horizon, having financial independence gave me the freedom to envision creating a company that perfectly aligned with my values and creative vision. I reached out to former colleagues whose work I respected, testing the waters for potential partnerships. Sarah Chen, a brilliant digital designer I had worked with at my previous firm, was the first to join my vision. Over coffee in my new home studio, I outlined my idea for a boutique agency specializing in branding for socially conscious businesses and nonprofits. It sounds amazing, Sarah said, but startups are risky. How are you planning to fund it during the inevitable lean early months? Let's just say my great-aunt's inheritance included some investment capital earmarked for entrepreneurial ventures, I replied with a small smile. I can sustain the business until it becomes profitable. Within 3 months of being kicked out of my parents' house, I had secured my first major client for Parker Design Collective, the agency that began as a dream and was quickly becoming reality. The project was a complete rebranding for a fair trade coffee company with a budget that would have seemed astronomical to me before the lottery win. To celebrate this milestone, I hosted a small dinner party at my townhouse, inviting Heather, Sarah, and a few other close friends who had supported me through my transition. As we enjoyed good food and wine on my rooftop deck, watching the sunset over the Boston skyline, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. A toast, Heather proposed, raising her glass. To Allison, who got knocked down but came back stronger than ever. Your parents have no idea what they lost. As everyone clinked glasses, I felt a twinge of sadness beneath my happiness. Heather was right. My parents had no idea what they had lost, and not just in the financial sense. They had lost the chance to know me as I truly was, to be part of my success and happiness. Despite everything, there was still a small part of me that wished they could have accepted me on my own terms. But I pushed that thought aside. This evening wasn't about what I had lost. It was about what I had gained: true independence, supportive friendships, creative fulfillment, and the freedom to define success on my own terms. Later that night, after my guests had gone home, I stood on my rooftop alone, looking out at the city lights. 6 months ago, I had been living under my parents' roof, subject to their judgment and conditions. Now I was standing on the roof of my own multi-million-dollar home, with a thriving career, a charitable foundation, and the beginnings of my own company. The lottery win had given me financial freedom, certainly, but the true wealth was in discovering my own resilience and worth, something that had been inside me all along, waiting for the chance to emerge. 6 months had passed since that fateful Friday when my parents had thrown me out and the universe had handed me a winning lottery ticket in the same day. Spring had given way to summer, and summer was now yielding to the crisp autumn air that made Boston feel magical. My design agency, Parker Design Collective, had grown beyond my most optimistic projections. We now had a team of 6 talented designers working from a small but stylish office space in the South End, just a short walk from my townhouse. Our client list included sustainable fashion brands, environmental nonprofits, and socially conscious startups, exactly the kind of meaningful work I had always wanted to do. The irony wasn't lost on me that the business my father had dismissed as drawing pictures was now generating significant revenue with a waitlist of clients eager to work with us. Of course, he still didn't know this. As far as my parents were concerned, I had disappeared from their lives entirely after walking out their door with a single suitcase. I had maintained my anonymity as a lottery winner, with the New Horizon Trust shielding my identity from public records. My lifestyle, while comfortable, wasn't ostentatious enough to raise questions. Friends and colleagues attributed my new home and business to the fictional inheritance, and I had become adept at deflecting questions about my family. On a crisp Saturday afternoon in October, I was attending the opening of a new exhibition at the MFA featuring emerging local artists. The Arts Foundation I had established had provided grants to several of the exhibiting artists, though my connection to the foundation remained private. As I stood admiring a particularly striking mixed media piece, a familiar voice behind me sent a shock through my system. The technique is interesting, but the composition lacks discipline. My mother. I would recognize her crisp, judgmental tone anywhere. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Diane Parker looked exactly as she always had, elegantly dressed in a tailored suit. Her hair perfectly styled, her posture impeccable. What I wasn't prepared for was the flash of shock that crossed her face when she recognized me, quickly masked with the social poise she had perfected over decades. "Allison," she said, her voice carefully modulated to betray no emotion. "What a surprise." "Hello, Mother," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded despite the emotional turbulence inside. "I didn't expect to see you here. Dad never approved of spending weekends at art museums." "Your father is at a conference in New York," she said. "I came with the Ladies' Auxiliary Group." She gestured vaguely toward a cluster of women her age examining a sculpture across the gallery. An awkward silence fell between us. 6 months of unspoken words hung in the air. "You look well," she finally said, her eyes taking in my designer outfit and the confident way I now carried myself. "I am well," I confirmed. "Very well, actually." "We wondered where you ended up," she said, a hint of accusation in her tone. "You never called." "You threw me out, Mom," I reminded her gently. "With one suitcase and no warning. It didn't seem like you wanted to hear from me." She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "We thought you would come to your senses after a few days. When you didn't, you assumed I was suffering the consequences of my poor choices," I finished for her. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm actually thriving." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, I can see that. Your great-aunt's inheritance must have been substantial." So she had heard the cover story through our social circle. I simply nodded, neither confirming nor denying. "The design career is going well," she asked, her tone suggesting she expected me to admit defeat. "Extremely well," I said. "I started my own agency. We have more clients than we can handle, and a growing team of talented designers." Something flickered across her face, surprise, disbelief, perhaps even a reluctant respect. Before she could respond, one of her friends called her name, signaling it was time for their group to move to the next gallery. "I should go," she said, hesitating slightly. "Your father. He would want to know you're doing well." "Would he?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Or would he be disappointed that I succeeded without following his plan?" She didn't answer directly. "He misses you in his way. We both do." "I miss the parents I wish I had," I replied honestly. "The ones who would have supported my dreams instead of trying to replace them with their own." She flinched slightly at that. "Perhaps we could have lunch sometime, to talk." I considered the offer. Part of me wanted to refuse outright to protect myself from falling back into old patterns, but another part recognized that holding on to anger would only limit my own happiness going forward. "I'd consider that," I said carefully, "but only if it comes without conditions or expectations. I've built a life I'm proud of, Mom. I won't apologize for it or pretend to be someone I'm not even for you and Dad. She nodded stiffly, then turned to join her friends. Our conversation, apparently over as abruptly as it had begun. I remained in the gallery long after she had gone, processing the unexpected encounter. I had imagined our eventual reunion countless times, but the reality had been both more mundane and more powerful than any scenario I had envisioned. 2 weeks later, my father called. The conversation was brief and uncomfortable, with his barely concealed disbelief at my reported success and thinly veiled suggestions that I must have compromised myself in some way to achieve it. "I always knew you were resourceful, Allison," he said in a tone that made it clear this wasn't entirely a compliment. "But going from being asked to leave our home to supposedly running your own successful business in 6 months strains credibility." "Believe what you want to believe, Dad," I replied calmly. "My work speaks for itself, and I'm happy to show you our client portfolio if you're genuinely interested. And this inheritance story everyone's talking about, convenient timing." I could have told him then. Could have revealed that through a cosmic twist of fate, I had won the lottery the very day he had thrown me out. The temptation to see his face when he realized what he had done was strong. But what would that accomplish, really? "Life works out in unexpected ways sometimes," was all I said. He made a non-committal sound, then asked if I would be attending Thanksgiving at their home, his version of an olive branch, I supposed. "I have plans with friends," I told him truthfully. "But thank you for the invitation." The conversation ended shortly after, with nothing truly resolved but a door perhaps left slightly ajar for the future. Instead of dwelling on what might have been with my parents, I poured my energy into creating positive change where I could. The art scholarship fund I established at Boston University was named the Lewis Inspiration Grant in honor of my high school art teacher, who had believed in me when my parents wouldn't. The first recipients were 3 talented students from underprivileged backgrounds, who might otherwise have abandoned their artistic pursuits for more practical paths. At the scholarship award ceremony, I gave a brief speech about the importance of following your passion and finding mentors who support your authentic self. As I looked out at the faces of the young artists, I felt a sense of healing that no amount of luxury purchases could have provided. Sometimes, the most valuable thing someone can give you is not money or connections, I told them, but simply the belief that your voice matters and your vision has value. My hope is that this scholarship provides not just financial support, but the validation that your artistic journey is worthwhile. Later that evening, as I hosted an art showcase for the scholarship recipients and other young artists at my townhouse, I reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. I had lost my family but found my tribe. I had been rejected for who I was, but had created a life that celebrated exactly that. I had been thrown out with nothing but had discovered I already possessed everything I needed: talent, resilience, and the courage to stand up for myself. The money had provided freedom and opportunities, certainly, but the true transformation had come from within, from finally breaking free of the need for approval that had shaped so much of my early life. As the evening wound down and I said goodbye to the last guests, Heather lingered behind to help clean up. "You know what I love most about all this?" she asked, gesturing around the beautiful space filled with art and evidence of a life well lived. "It's not the fancy house or the successful business. It's seeing you finally comfortable in your own skin." "That's the real lottery win," I agreed, finding myself in the process of losing everything else. That night, as I stood on my rooftop deck looking out at the Boston skyline, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been painful at times, but I wouldn't change it. Every step, even the painful ones, had led me exactly where I needed to be. Perhaps someday my relationship with my parents would heal into something healthier. Perhaps not, but I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. The universe had handed me an extraordinary gift on the day they had rejected me, but the most valuable part wasn't the money. It was the push I needed to finally claim my own life on my own terms. Sometimes you have to lose everything to gain yourself, and that I had discovered is the greatest wealth of all. Have you ever had a moment when what seemed like your worst day unexpectedly became your best? Or when someone's rejection actually set you free? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. And if you know someone who might need this reminder that sometimes our darkest moments lead to our brightest futures, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' approval, but by your courage to live authentically.